libraries are all based in Python. So there is a Web3 library called web3.py, which is obviously a Python specific library, and it's maintained pretty well, but it's not the same as the ones for the website. And because you don't have MetaMask just like built into it, then it's a little bit harder to deal with things like wallets and transactions and things like that. So I kind of figured through this course we would start now with the web stuff so that we can get familiar with some of the patterns and some of the things that we need to do. And then as we go, we can translate that into Python, maybe, if people are interested in that. So any questions so far?
No, but it sounds really interesting. I mean, just keep on rolling. I see a lot of stuff about, people trying to, a lot of the colleges and universities around this area are trying to run like Python boot camps and stuff like that. You know what I mean? So, and I've given it some thought, but hell, I got a million things going on. But yeah, I mean, I'm totally paying attention.
Yeah, I mean, if I were going to pick a programming language to stop, I would, or to start with, I would pick Python. Right. So yeah, here we've got just silly stuff right right on their website.
So what do we have to do to get one of these things up and running?
Special cases aren't special enough to break the rules. Yeah, so I think last week, right about the time that I got dropped off, I also started to talk about alchemy, right? So in our Web3 toolbox, there's a whole bunch of things that we can use, and alchemy is a node provider. So MetaMask, which I think pretty much everyone is familiar with at this point, is a wallet, and it handles making transactions, signing transactions, all the data things that have to happen to interact with the blockchain, and it gives you a little UI to make that easy. And but behind the scenes, when you use MetaMask, it's a web application, right? So it's talking to something, and that something that it's talking to is an application called Infura, right? So Infura is a node operator. So both MetaMask and Infura are projects from Consensus. And Consensus is a blockchain company. Basically, they've been around since the very beginning. They make all sorts of stuff. They maintain a lot of infrastructure, and then they fund a lot of projects in general in the ecosystem, and they operate with a hub and spoke model, which is a pretty Web3 way to run a business, right? Each project is kind of autonomous and manages itself and has a lot of its own decision-making authority, and they're pretty hands-off with all that stuff, right? So when Ethereum was getting all set up, they funded Infura and MetaMask and this project called Truffle, which is a developer tool that runs locally, which we're not going to get into that stuff right now. But when you send a excuse me. When you send a transaction, or even like read like these balances right here that are coming through MetaMask, it's talking to Infura, and I think I can just log in here, right? So okay, I don't care about any of that. So there's different projects, right? You set up a project. This one doesn't have any data in it, but this is basically a view into a server, or a set of servers that they're running, where I can debug blockchain things, right? So Alchemy is another one of these, and they're basically just running Ethereum nodes in the cloud and making them available to people with these nice, pretty dashboards. And I have a slight preference for Alchemy just because I think that their API offerings are a little bit better. It's more of a one-stop shop. But the other thing that's kind of nice about Alchemy is that if you go into their developer hub, they've got a bunch of getting started information, in their docs on like how to build stuff basically, and the tooling that they use is pretty much like the default set of stuff that any engineer would use nowadays to build a blockchain application. So Visual Studio, or specifically Visual Studio Code, is a development environment. Remix is also a development environment. I already mentioned React and Next.js, right, which are for websites. Hard Hat is a tool that is used to manage writing and deploying smart contracts and testing them. Alchemy and Infura are both node operators that run so that you can talk to the network. The simplest way to think of what Alchemy and Infura do is it's kind of like BitTorrent, right? Where you want to serve up a file or download a file or something, and you would just talk to them and they'd do it so you don't have to run your own stuff, basically. Ethers.js is a JavaScript library that makes it easier to deal with writing all of the code itself. It has all these like simple abstractions on top of. Oh, I don't understand why these things aren't opening. Oh, it's because they're linked down here. So like if I go. In here, so like this is going to just describing the Ethers JavaScript library, which is somebody just wrote all of this stuff to deal with blockchain stuff, right? So there's blocks and accounts and the node operators and the APIs. So they've got APIs to talk to Infura and Alchemy and a bunch of other ones too, right? Because they all provide slightly different stuff. And then there's different types. Signers, wallets, right? So like signing a transaction, which is what you do every time that you try to make a state change on the blockchain. If you want to transfer something from one wallet to another, or mint, what you're actually doing under the hood is just signing a piece of data that says yes, I want to do this. And then there's like all the things in here to deal with contracts and reading from them, writing to them, deploying them. Listening to changes on them, like dealing with numbers and strings and data conversions and all sorts of stuff, right? And then I think we're all pretty familiar with Etherscan at this point, right? Etherscan is a website that makes it easier to see what the state of everything is at any given time. It's just like another service. So I know I'm not expecting anyone to remember what all this stuff is. It's just kind of important to go through it to get an understanding. First off, that everything that we do is built on the backs of other people, right? And there are countless hours of effort that have gone into building and maintaining these things, all of which are free. And there's a lot of people that want this to succeed, and that shows through all the tooling that's been built, right? And there's a lot of complexity here, but we can try our best to try to distill it down so that the barrier to entry on this stuff is relatively low. And believe me, like looking at this set of tools right here is actually much, much better than what this experience was like, say, 4, 5, 6 years ago, where the stuff was not just in one place. And, these things didn't talk to each other in really nice and convenient ways like they do now. So yeah, that's kind of where we are. You're welcome if you're interested in this stuff. I would recommend that you just go through, this website and, read through some of these things. you can probably skip most of these commands, if you don't, but just getting an understanding and familiarity with the language that's used here, because a lot of it's esoteric and it's a lot of jargon, and things like that. And once you get past all that stuff, it's not any different than, building anything else, really, right? Like you set out with a specific objective. You break that down into tasks or constituent parts that can be completed or accomplished, and then you figure out how to make those things happen. Building a house is usually an analogy that a lot of people use for building a software project. There are some differences. One of those is that you don't always know exactly what you're building when you start building in software. Whereas when you're building a house, you pretty much always know you're building a house. But a lot of the same nuances come up, right? Like there's people that are good at specific contractor services, like plumbing or electrical or framing and or concrete or whatever, and like you need to lean on the expertise of different people and different skills in order to get something constructed. And to make something successful. And of course, like everyone has to be on the same page about exactly what's going to happen when, otherwise, shit falls apart, yada, yada, all that stuff. Right. So, that's pretty much the contract, the context of where we're working here. So, like I said, we're going to be using Rainbow, or we're going to be using Next.js, right? Which is just an application stack that it runs on top of React, which is the Facebook application that I mentioned earlier, a library that they had created that has a very specific way to build web pages. And they also make it pretty easy to get started. So I have a project when I prepped for this last week that I created, and this is Visual Studio Code, right? So this is basically where I work all day, right? And Next.js has these templates where you can just once you install the command line tools, you can just run this command and it'll give you a template that's this basically, right? So so that's all I did was run that, and then I put a little bit of scaffolding code into it to get it to talk to the Frogland services, and then now I can log into them. And I'm going to walk you through that in a second here. But there is one other component to this that I do want to talk about, which is Rainbow Kit. So Rainbow Kit is, if you guys have heard of the Rainbow wallet, if you haven't, you should check it out. They're building some really cool stuff.
Yeah, I was going to ask if it was affiliated.
Yeah, it is. So they maintain this library. What's really cool about devs in general, but specifically blockchain, is like helping other people is part of the culture, right? So they, for a very long time, it was very difficult to manage wallets, right? And even with all of this other tooling that I talked about, because there's so many different ones, Coinbase, Fortmatic, Argent, hardware wallets like Ledger, they all kind of work a little bit differently sometimes. And there's a lot of different ways that you can screw yourself up with them. And so Rainbow figured out a way that worked for them that they really liked, and they just gave it away. Right. So, and that's really common in our industry, right? It's like people build tools, and when those tools are working, they want other people to benefit from them. So yeah, this is from Rainbow Wallet. It is, for me, the best and the easiest wallet library to actually get working, because they just kind of give you this interface here and it just works, right? And you can change the way that it looks, but it's all, there's guardrails around it. And it's all pretty simple and straightforward. And there's just like a one way of doing things. And it's got some opinions that they've made, but they've also got some really great tutorials and things in here too. So they've got they also have a template, right, that's built on top of Next.js. And, because a lot of other devs use Next.js, it's a really popular framework built on React. They've built their toolkit using another library called WAGMI, which I think is fantastic. And WAGMI is a set of tools designed specifically to work with React and ethers. Remember, I talked a little bit about ethers earlier. I think I linked to it. I may have lost it, but so ethers is the JavaScript library that makes it easier to talk to wallets and blockchains and things like that. And then WAGMI is a library that takes that and makes it easier to use in React. And then RainbowKit is specifically designed for handling connections and disconnections and authentication type concerns on top of all of that stuff, right? So like you kind of start to see it's turtles all the way down. You know what I mean? Everyone's kind of building on top of the success of other people, and there's people that contribute at the low level, and then the next level up, and the next level up, and the next level up, and there's this whole ecosystem that keeps all this stuff going, right? So what RainbowKit does is they also have this a template system where you can just you can run the command line tool. npm is the command line tool. You don't necessarily need to know what that is right now. We'll talk about it in a minute. Or yarn or pnpm. There's a bunch of different ways to do this, but they all basically do the same thing, which is go out to the internet, grab all of this stuff so that you don't have to go get these things one at a time and stitch them all together. And what the output of that is a template like this, right? So you can actually see this application running. So I've got a command line here, right? Client server successfully running. So I'm running npm, the node package manager, the run command, and then dev, which just happens to be a task that's kind of just built in, and it's just a convention that people use. And that is just spinning up a little web server automatically here on my local host, and it is running right here in Chrome. And by just going to this port, I can see this website, and this is the RainbowKit WAGMI Next.js template website, right? Now I've thrown a connect button on the top, which is like the change that I made. But I'm gonna walk through this template here a little bit and just talk through what some of these things do and these folders and why they're here. So when you start out, it pretty much looks like this. And I'll go ahead and move some of this stuff off the screen here. We can focus primarily on a README. Every good project needs a README and package JSON. So in this README, let's see if I go here, go open preview. Yep. So their documentation is sending you back to their website to read their templates and their getting started information, and then it's trying to make this really easy for you to get started, right? And that's the other thing that's really nice about working on web stuff is typically for a lot of these tools, they dumb it down to the point where a handful of really good YouTube videos and a couple of good guides and documentation can get you up and running and fiddling with stuff in like less than 30 minutes, right? And that's what this is all kind of designed to do. So if I just pulled this down and said, okay, run npm run dev, and I did that, and now I got a website going that says, go ahead and open this on localhost, and you can see it. And then I can start modifying the page by going to pages, index, and I can actually make modifications. So one of the things that's cool about all of this stuff is it has this ability to do a hot reload, right? So what that means is I can usually go in here and just like make a change and hit save, and it will just automatically change that directly in the browser, right? So I can just start to make very specific changes. You can move things around. There's a specific syntax in HTML to define headers and paragraphs and other sections and segments. I'm not going to kind of go into any of that stuff right now because it's not that important for what we're trying to do. But it suffices to say that there are several different, subcategories of programming that are focused just exclusively on making these UIs look good, right? And dealing with all of this like bracket-based declarative HTML syntax, right? And CSS. And admittedly, that stuff is not my strong suit. I find it to be confusing and very difficult personally, but there are people who love it, right? And there's a culture around that's built kind of around accessibility, right? So a lot of devs that fall into that category that really like design will also take up the crusade of working with what are called like web safe colors, right? So things to help make things easier for people who are colorblind, or working with alternative inputs, or languages. So there are Braille readers out there for the web, right? That allow somebody to use their fingers to browse the web, and because the internet is held together with bubblegum and sticky tape, a lot of that stuff is not very consistently applied. So, there's a lot of effort put into fighting for those types of causes and things and trying to get that stuff to be better accepted. And, some of the UI frameworks do a very good job of those things and whatnot. But I find this stuff to be very difficult. So, however, if you go in here into the styles, you can see that this is actually where various CSS gets set that defines how this page actually works, right? So, each of these, titles and links and grids and, cards, these are all just terms that are being tossed in here and used, again, mostly by convention. And there are different types of design languages that are used for some of these things. GitHub has one that's really good. Spotify has their own, right? And a lot of larger companies will build one. Android has a very popular one. Google does. It's called Material, right? And that it defines like how much border space should be between an image and the next thing around the image for a given screen size, and all these other sorts of things that are really neat and interesting and fun. That's pretty much the basics of like how you actually build and change a website with just static text. I mean, I'm going over a whole lot of stuff here, but if I I think if I change this to none, right? I've got this. If I go over here and like mouse over this stuff, it underlines. I think if I just change this, yeah, see, it just turned off the underline, right? So things like that affect the visual representation is pretty much driven between the blocks of HTML and the CSS styles. And if you were going to build a website like the traditional way, that's all you would use. But what React and Next.js do is they add all of this fancy JavaScript on top of it to give you a very opinionated way to work with this stuff, right? So what I did here, oh, I'm sorry, there's one more thing I want to talk about. So this file right here called package.json, when I run that npm command, the node package manager, this is what is telling it what to do, right? So this is telling me that I've got my dependency for ethers here, ethers.js. I've got a dependency on React. I've got a dependency on WAGMI. I've got a dependency on Rainbow Kit, right, which is the wallet stuff, right, which is everything that I've already talked about. I'm using a tool called TypeScript, which is just a version of JavaScript that makes it easier to not make mistakes and shoot yourself in the foot. And then, of course, I've got my other dependencies in here are our dependencies. So the Frogland contracts project, and this is a package that I built, and then the Frogland backend, which is also a package that we built. And then we've got different scripts that we can invoke. So earlier when I said npm run dev, it reached in here and said dev. And then that actually runs another command line called next dev, which is invoking the next JS command tool thing. So you can also see here where conventions around language translate through all of this stuff. And that's like one of the only ways that you can keep it straight. So, every project starts out with, build, start, lint, and dev. So because that's just the way that people do things, it's made it easier for people to make good guesses about how things should work when they see the same patterns, right? Because a lot of this is pattern matching, and programming is very messy. It's a messy process, and things don't always behave the way that you expect. And there's people put a lot of nuance into using mnemonic terms and terminology and ways to work to try to make it easier, so you don't have to remember everything all the time, right? So that's pretty much the structure. I mean, there's some configuration stuff in here. There's that we can kind of gloss over for the moment. But so let's take a look. I've shown you pretty much what the template itself looks like. So now let's talk a little bit about what I actually put in here to get this thing to talk to our server, right? So I created a library folder. And I created an API class here. And what this API class does is it deals with an authentication token. You guys may have seen this term thrown around. It's not uncommon for these things to fail, right? And sometimes error messages on the internet aren't super helpful. So you might see like, error auth token expired or something like that. And the way that websites and other things communicate with servers in a validated way is that you quote unquote log in, right? And you ask the server and say, hey, can I do this thing? And the server says, yeah, sure. You've got a username and password. That sounds good. Here, hold on to this token, which is really just a cryptographic primitive. And every time that you want to talk to us, just send that to, and then we'll know that you are who you say. Basically is how that works, right? So what I did here is I created, I wrapped up the Frogland backend package here, which exposes all of this stuff because our servers do that too, right? And so there's an authentication API, and there's a token, and then there's configuration, and then there's a message that gets sent, right? And then there's a response that comes back, and there are tokens, right? We got frogs and land devices that we can screw around with, right? So I think if I go here, so like I can, and I just hit function F12, right? Which is a shortcut. And if I go back here and do that again, I can right click here, and I see this context menu that comes up. And in this context menu, I can go to definition, right? And go to definition means go to where this particular thing is defined, right? So right now, when I do that, I'm going into the Frogland backend package that the package manager pulled down and gave me, and it threw it in this hidden folder here called node modules. And you can see that there's just like this big pile of shit in here that I don't know what it is. No one does, right? But you can use the tool to find where this stuff is. And in here, you can go and see like what types of things we can get about tokens, right? So we can get, the status of an avatar. And in our particular case, that means if an avatar was claimed or not, and which wallet claimed it, right? Like that's information that we have and know that's on the blockchain. And we expose that through these tools. And you could just go to the blockchain and get this yourself if you wanted to, but we're trying to, provide a way for people to do this, right? So we have a wrapper around that stuff. And, if you trust us, you can use our tools, and you can go and get all this information and get up and running and do stuff with it. And if you don't trust us, but you still want to use that stuff or like have it easy, you can also use that stuff, and then you can go verify yourself. right? And we want to be able to support both of those workflows. So, but what we're actually doing here is we want to log in because we can't talk to anything on the server until the server knows who we are. And because we're working on Web3, and because we have the wallets, and MetaMask and those sorts of things, we already have an authorization context, right? Like you as a user who's coming to this are bringing a wallet with you, which is effectively a piece of cryptographic material that only you know is protected, right? Your private keys, right? So we don't actually need to store passwords because you have your own password in your hand and you're a responsible individual and you would never leak it on the internet, right? So we just piggyback on that, and internally we ask the user to sign a message, right? Like, so if you guys have gone and claimed your frogs, and you've probably done this on other websites too, where once you connect your wallet, it pops up a thing that says sign message, and you sign that message, and once that happens, you're sending that message to our server, which is just in the open, basically. Anyone could read it. I mean, it is encrypted, but it wouldn't matter if it wasn't because it can't be tampered with. And we take a look at that and we verify that you were allowed to sign that, as in like that your private key is correct, right? And once we've verified that, we say, okay, you have sent us an intention to log into our server. We're just going to log you in. We don't need a password. We don't need to check your password because you've already proven that you are who you say you are because you've proven that you have your private key, right? Pretty cool, right? That's where the power of this stuff, at least for me, makes a huge difference, because in the old world, right, you're constantly worried about servers losing passwords. I mean, it's not a week goes by that a major company isn't hacked and everyone's personal information's out on the internet, right? So with Web3, because we are putting a little bit more responsibility in the hands of general users to protect their private keys and to get educated on how to do that, and what that means, it does give us a lot more power. It gives the users a lot more power, and it also means that we, as infrastructure providers and operators, don't have to take on the risk of managing your own data, right? Like, there are some companies out there that want that data, but we don't, right? There's a lot of responsibility that comes with that stuff, and like, we're not in that business, basically, right? So what this code here on the screen does is it takes the authentication API services that we've already exposed, right, or that we've exposed on the back end, and we've just defined a very specific way to talk to us, and this library implements that, and there's documentation in here that tells you how to do all this stuff if you're a developer and you know how to look at it and read it. And you can see that there's, I know this is kind of hard to read right here on the screen. There are other ways to browse this stuff, but there's examples, and there's descriptions around all the different things that go in here that make sense to people, engineers, and then you can build a class much like this one, right? So like this class right here, this api.ts file that I'm working with, is something that someone who wants, like any normal developer who wants to work with our stuff, would write something like this, right? So I've gone ahead and just built one that's pretty similar to the one that's on our website already. And what this does is, it's got a login function here to talk to the server. And then it's saying, API, call the API, call the authentication method, to do an Ethereum login, and send a post request, right? Which is a very particular type of request. There's, get and post are the terms that are used on the web. So it's basically just, send and receive, more or less, right? And then, we've got the ability to log out. We can, get the frogs that are in a wallet. And we've got this method in here that's private, that's internal, that is a assign authorization header. And what this really means is once I have my authentication token, after logging in. So I've called the API and the result comes back. And then that result is an authentication token, and I'm just going to hold on to it, right? While we're on the website, we're just going to hang on to it. And then, any other request that we're going to make, we're going to assign that auth token into the HTTP header. And this is just a part of how HTTP works, right? There's headers and bodies and all these other things, but suffice to say that this is the way that when we send the request to the server to do something, like say, hey, give me all of the frogs that are in my wallet, I want to see them. This authentication token goes along with that, and we say, okay, cool, you've logged in. We know who you are, or you're real. So yeah, you can do this, right? And what's important to note here too is our server, when I say log in, I mean just with your wallet. We don't know who you are. You could be anyone. You don't even necessarily have to have frogs in your wallet, right? You can sign an Ethereum message as just a random anonymous person and connect to our services and read all the things about frogs that there is to read, right? You don't need to be a member of the community or anything. It's just open and it's available, right? And that's kind of, one of the ways that we're going to be able to contribute our own infrastructure out to, all the other NFT projects and, metaverse projects and things that are available. They'll be able to just access this stuff. So if somebody else is building for something else, in one of our, a competitor or even another project, and they want to read all this stuff, they can just come over here and do it. And the only thing that we're asking them to bring with them is an Ethereum wallet so that we know that you're, if you're spamming us, basically we can turn it off, because these things can be abused, right? So we've got systems in place to make sure that stuff doesn't happen. But if somebody's being a bad actor or trying to ruin it for everyone else, we can basically say this wallet can't connect anymore, and then they won't be able to connect, and things should go back to normal, right? So I know it's a whole lot of stuff that I've thrown at you. Does anybody have any questions? We're also right about.
I have a very big question, and it's kind of philosophical, but I think it's a big one. What is all right, let me try to articulate this. Who is the body who would be making these rules that the contract would enforce? Because I feel like in Web3, blacklisting a wallet is kind of crazy, which I'm not saying it isn't needed, and it isn't a function that I think is a good one. But if we're going to implement it, I think it's going to be our responsibility to make sure that we do it the right way. But that's kind of my question and statement is how are we thinking about doing that? And yeah.
Great question. So that actually, that's going to help me put a finer point here on the scope of what I said leading into this, which was that if somebody's being a bad actor, we can turn it off. So if you remember a little bit if we rewind about 7 minutes, I said that, if you trust us and want to use our infrastructure, you can do that, and you can use it, but you don't have to. You can just go and verify all this stuff on the blockchain, right? You can access the blockchain in your own way. When I say that we can turn off access, I mean we can only turn off access from our services, right? So the servers that we're running for the benefit of the community, that make it more convenient to access this stuff, they cost money. And, if somebody's being a dick about it, we can disable access to that. But what we can't do is disable their access to any of the actual information that's being served, like the metadata of the frogs. They are perfectly welcome to go find somebody else who's willing to put up with their crap and
No, I get that part, but I mean within our own server, what I mean, I understand. It's one thing to kick someone from a server, or to ban someone from a server, and I'm not sure that this would even be that drastic. This is kind of a function, like you said, you're using our thing, and if you don't use it right, then we're gonna basically turn off your function to it, and you're still welcome to interact with the project. You just can't be in the server. That's what I'm understanding. I'm just wondering what the rules and regulations would be, not exactly word for word, but what that would look like.
So I mean, As far as at the social layer, that's a much bigger question than I can answer, especially right now, and it's definitely not up to me. But what I can say is that when we're talking specifically about accessing these types of tools that we're providing for convenience, I arbitrarily made some very sane default choices on how this works. And there's this concept of rate limiting, right? And what that means is that each wallet basically has an allocation of the number of times they can request something from the server. And that allocation is like 10 times a second, right? And 1,000 in a minute and 10,000 in 10 minutes or something like that. I forget exactly what it is, but it's something, it scales kind of like that. So it's like anyone who's just using it normally, is not going to get hit by those things. Except for maybe if there's a power user out there who, like let's say we wanted to feed all of this stuff into an AI and we wanted to scrape this a whole bunch of data off of our server all at once, say like once every 5 minutes, right? And the way that you could do that is because we haven't exposed a specific way to do that yet. You would have to make individual function calls, which would mean that you would be calling. You would probably exceed that limit if you had a fast computer and a fast internet connection, right? Which would lead to one of two things. Like either you are a malicious actor and aren't involved in the community and you're just going to have to deal with it, or you figure out how to reach out, like, through the Discord and say, hey, I'm so-and-so and I'm building an application to work with this stuff and I'm starting to hit your rate limits. And I was wondering if you could expose this particular thing for me so that that's not a problem. And I would say, of course, right? So some of it just comes down to, developer time and effort, and then making some basic choices around, what we think the server infrastructure can handle, because like scaling this stuff is a challenge. And like I said, it has a cost associated with it. So we just chosen some arbitrary numbers that make sense and implemented a way to stop that from being a problem.
No, that was the answer to my question. The philosophical part was less of an issue. That was more of like, I was trying to figure out like, what were you looking for? Were you looking for like people trying to, I get it now. So thank you for that. No, and I think this is really cool. I hopped in here kind of by accident. I didn't really know that Tuesdays was right now, but I'm glad I hopped in because I'm learning a lot.
Well, we were a little hungover, so we're late. Yeah, I mean, does anybody else have any other specific questions? I mean, I know we've kind of hit the hour here, and I have thrown a lot of jargon around, so I definitely understand if now would be a good time to stop. There are a couple of other things that I wouldn't mind talking about, but we can also save it for next time.
Can I ask one more question, Matt?
Go for it.
All right. So when you go to a website and you connect your wallet and it asks you to sign that signature,
Mhm.
and I actually, it saved me one day, and I'm so thankful that this happened because I've never really like connected to a malicious site before. But one of my friends got hacked on their Instagram. Someone made a new Instagram, and it was very convincing. And so I went to go connect to the site, but the MetaMask said, be careful. Like this is a sketchy. It basically said, be careful. And I was like, oh, okay. So I'm not going to do it. My question is more about like the function of the sign, right? Where in the sign function, like what about signing that permission is giving them the ability to take away funds, take away NFTs, or take away, even like you said, we were talking about data of data of the users themselves. Like how are people getting that from the signature aspect?
There are so many ways that people have figured out to screw other people over, basically, right? Basics, obviously the basics are, make sure that the website that you're on is the one that you're supposed to be on. Browsers these days are pretty good about making sure that whatever it says up here is really where you are, right? So you can see over here too, I've got this like debug screen that's open, and it's got all this other stuff in it, right? So this is the Chrome developer tool. So if I close this, the best way for you to open this is you can just right click on something, right? And then there's this inspect button right here. As soon as you hit inspect, it's going to take you to whatever that thing is that you opened directly inside of the HTML, right? So like, get started by editing, right? Compare that over here to get started by editing paragraph, right? So this is what the actual code looks like. And this is what it looks like when it's rendered in the browser, right? So you can see, paragraph H1, it's added in its own little thingies in here. Welcome, Froggy. You can even change these, right, directly here in the browser, right? Because this whole platform is completely open. And so these tools in here, even if you're not a developer, in some cases can be useful, specifically this console, right? So the console is pretty much just events that have happened. I can refresh the page, it's telling you, auth check equals true. If I go in here and I search for auth check, you can see that I've got a console log where I'm telling it to write this out. So I'll check Froggy and I return, I'll check Froggy. See, I just made that change. So sometimes you can deduce just by looking at this stuff in here, whether or not it's shady, even if you don't really know a lot about these things, right? So the network tab shows you all of the requests that the browser has made to some server, to any server, whatever, right? And a lot of this stuff, should read like things that you would maybe expect to see, right? Like page.js, right? And also in some cases you can see where it's going, right? And sometimes these things even tell you like what the origin is, what the IP address is that you're talking to. Like there's a lot of stuff in here that can be helpful. Like, I don't know if you guys remember, but at one point, I don't know if it was during the LSD launches, maybe, where a few people were having some issues, and I was actually asking them to just open this up and go to the console and tell me what it said here, right? And grab a screenshot of this, So sometimes that can be really useful, but this network tab in particular can tell you if the website that you are on is talking to somewhere that it shouldn't be talking to in some cases. It's obviously, it's very hard to disambiguate all of this stuff, right? Which is like, Webpack and, TS colon, dist rainbow things, like what is all that stuff, right? But if you go look at the source tab, this is basically the packaged up website as it comes from the server itself. So since I'm looking at this on my own computer, this is the code that it makes. Like when I hit the save button over here, the Next.js tool, it says compiling, right? It's doing a thing behind the scenes, and then it makes the website, and that looks a lot like this thing right here. In fact, that's what this is, right? So there's a whole lot of stuff in here that I didn't write, right? That Next.js and all the other tools that I brought bring to the table about how all this stuff works. And for most websites, you actually won't be able to read this because they're gonna do what's called minify it, right? Which means that they're gonna shorten down all the letters because we're talking about the web here, characters matter. So they're gonna name things like, rather than naming this clear marks, the compiler is gonna name it C, right? And it's gonna be completely illegible. But nevertheless, you can still see over here where stuff is coming from, right? So like I've got MetaMask in here, it's injecting stuff into the page, the Terra wallet, I can't believe I still have that installed. The Kepler wallet, and then the Ethereum provider stuff. Actually, here's a great example of one that is minified. Like this is what most websites look like when you come in here and you look. It's going to look like this. Like, M equals E, comma, N dot Z equals T, comma, N, right? Like completely impossible to read. But sometimes when you look at these things, you can get an idea if it's doing anything shady, like if it's trying to push it off to another network or if it's routing it through somewhere weird. So you can kind of just open this up and just be like, I guess it checks the litmus test. If you don't know, you can drop a question in one of the channels and drop a screenshot of some of this stuff, and either I or someone else in the community who knows how this stuff works can help you, right? So that's one thing. But then specifically with the wallets, so if I here just disconnect this and go ahead and refresh the page. So you'll notice here that since I disconnected the wallet from MetaMask, Rainbow already figured that out. So I click on connect and I hit MetaMask, right? And now it's going to pop up this guy right here to ask me to connect, and I'm going to hit connect. And then it's going to tell me that I need to verify my account. And then it's going to ask me for the signature, right? So, Lobo, I think this is what you're talking about, right? When you see this and you're just like, what is all that stuff, right? So, one thing.
And while you're on here, right, and this is perfect, yeah. My question, I guess, mainly would be like, what type of words would you be looking for in the inspect that would be like, oh shit, don't touch this?
Yeah, so the number one thing is the wallet address matching your wallet address, right? So depending on what you're trying to do, these messages are going to look different, right? Because this is a login message and it's obviously unformatted, but this is the account, and it's saying like Frogland, the server, wants you to sign in with your Ethereum account. Please sign this message. Signing is free, and where you're signing into. And then it's just got a bunch of jumbled data that means something to the server and not to you, right? But the most important thing in here is that this is your actual wallet address, right? And most of these signatures, that's what it's really trying to get you to check, is to make sure, like, and in some cases, especially if you're dealing with like a smart contract, it might not always say your wallet, but what you can do is when you come in here and grab a screenshot of this, just grab a screenshot of the parts that are not gonna invade your privacy, and like you can share that stuff with us, or a small group, or you can ask for specific help, and I might ask you for that type of thing. Because there's typically never any secret values in here, because these things are broadcast. They're designed to be broadcast to the Ethereum network, so it's all public, basically, right? So the way ours works actually is that there's a couple different ways you can log in, but one of the ways that you can log in is like we deployed a smart contract that's called an authentication contract, right? And when you sign those messages, not this way, but like on our website, you're actually signing against that contract on a specific network. So we're also proving that you are intending to log into our system against the blockchain, right? Which can't really be faked. And specifically mainnet, ETH mainnet, right? So, there's things like that, right? So like you might see other addresses in here, like that might be, our address for our login, our authentication contract that's out sitting out there, and all that does, that specific contract, it says that this message is shaped like this, and that this is what you should expect, right? So anyone can go and verify that the login requests that are coming into our server are the kind that are required by the blockchain, right? And that's like one extra way that we can check the security on that stuff. But when you're looking at this stuff as a user and you're on a random website, you're definitely going to want to make sure that whatever these messages are, especially if it's like a transfer function or a set approval for all, right? I think you guys have probably heard some of those terms already, especially when dealing with OpenSea. You just want to just double check that the from and the to are correct. And in most cases, if those things are correct, then you shouldn't have a problem. But I will always say, I will say, especially at this point, in the depths of the bear market, like if you're unsure, you're not, you're going to have to weigh your own and make your own decision of whether or not you think the upside is worth it to degen mint something random from some shady website that doesn't have any verification on it, right? We've all done it. Like, I'm not going to say that I haven't, but that's a risk we all take. And doing other things like using hot wallets versus cold storage or vaults, depending on what you want to call them, is another good tactic there. So like, when in doubt, like if you've got a wallet that's a throwaway wallet and like maybe it's got a couple of NFTs in it, but they're not of particularly high value and you don't really care, like that's probably the right wallet to use, because if something bad happens, at least the damage is mitigated and minimized, things like that. So there's a lot of different tricks that you can use to try to stay safe. But like the number one thing you can do to stay safe is to just educate yourself on how all this shit works.
Thank you, bro.
Yep, always. All right. Well, I think maybe we should call it there. I'm happy to go through like how the authentication actually works, which is in fact what I've got up here on the screen. But we don't have to. We can save that for next week. In fact, I think we should because it's been an hour, and I'm sure your brains are popping out because I know mine is. Whoops.
Definitely.
All right.
We appreciate it. It's definitely interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff here. It's not as daunting as you might think, right? Like with anything, you start small and you start in one place and then you build on each incremental success. And before you know it, you've got like way more confidence that you should have, and your Jenga tower topples over and everything gets all fucked up, right?
Right.
But that's called learning,
Definitely.
So yeah, it's very fun. I think it is because you can do things that have never been done before and make cool stuff that other people can enjoy. And see people smile. I don't know. Like I'll show you. I just showed this to Daniel the other day. So one of the things in the HTTP protocol is that there's status codes, right? We've all, you all heard of 404, right? The little Tyrannosaurus Rex that you get, 404 is not found, right? 500,
Yeah.
500 is internal server error. And there's a whole bunch of them, right? So the way that I keep them all straight is this website called HTTP Cats. And this is a visual representation to remind you what all of those codes mean. And I think that it's the greatest thing ever, right? Non-authoritative information.
It makes sense. If it's something you're interested in, then you're going to sort of relate to info. That's pretty cool.
Moved permanently. There's some good ones in here.
Yeah.
That's so demented.
Bad request.
It actually makes a lot of sense.
Payment required. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of them in here. There's one, because the people who built the web initially early on are silly. There's one in here. Yeah, there's an enhance your calm, and I'm a teapot.
Huh.
How do you get I'm a teapot?
So we would have to serve that from the server, and it's just something like when we set up the server, and I built that that library. I implement a lot of these codes in order to tell whoever's calling what's happening, right? So like if you look for something, like if you ask for something that's not there, you're going to get 404 back, right? And so we would have to implement one of these that returns that. So, yeah, we could do that. if you want. It's funny. Plugged by Windows parental controls. Unavailable for legal reasons.
Huh.
Goodness. Do you guys read XKCD?
No.
You should read XKCD if you don't. This will help you be a better developer, and you won't even know it, right? So Randall Monroe is the gentleman who came up with this. And he's got these little comics every day. And a lot of it has an intersection with, nerdy culture. And there's a lot of like engineer related stuff in here, right? So like high accuracy, low accuracy, high precision, low precision. You get a random one. Yeah, that's way too many words to read.
And there's the teapot.
Huh.
Nice. Anyway, cool. So that's what I got for today.
Well, that was definitely interesting. Way, way, way the hell over my head, but interesting.
Made a tutorial on how to navigate GitHub.
Yes.